It's not often that a single professional sporting event perfectly encapsulates the strengths and weaknesses of the promotion behind it, but such was the case when the K-1 Kickboxing Company held its annual World Grand Prix Finals on December 7, 2002, in Tokyo. I've previously made a video detailing the most successful kickboxing event of the continental United States, but I'll now examine what may very well be the most successful kickboxing event in history. The legendary Japanese Federation claimed to have jammed 74,500 fans into the Tokyo Dome on this night, the biggest drawing of the venue's existence. If this number is accurate, it would eclipse attendance rates for other monumental dome events, like the Kinki Kids' 10th anniversary concert, and Antonio Inoki's retirement wrestling show. It's difficult to imagine another kickboxing event drawing comparable attendance anywhere in the world, and this underlines just how popular K-1 was, having brought the sport back from its commercial slump of the 80s and early 90s. Viewers inside the arena, in addition to those watching via television, were witness to one of the most significant demonstrations of competitive martial arts ever, along with a hearty helping of thinly veiled drama. It's time to take a close look at how the event played out, what made it special, and what made it controversial. The World Grand Prix of 2002 was more than just the culmination of K-1's year-long series of international tournaments. It was an attempt by the company to rediscover its identity and set the stage for a new generation of stars. Over 2 years after its occurrence, K-1 still felt the loss of the great Andy Hoog having died in August 2000, of leukemia. The blue-eyed samurai was synonymous with the Federation, and his death left a void that had yet to be filled by another boxer who resonated as strongly with Japanese fans. K-1 had spent much of 2001 and 2002 cultivating and promoting fighters they hoped would be the next fan favorite, who could be established in this role by winning the year's biggest tournament. It would be a difficult task, as the finals also included many of kickboxing's greatest stars of the past decade, among them 5 former finalists and 3 Grand Prix champions. For all the importance and spectacle of the show, it actually was something of a minimalist event, featuring only 8 matches, 7 tournament bouts and 1 reserve contest. There were no super fights. The show opens with the reserve match, in which Canada's McDonald takes on Sweden's Martin Holm. McDonald is a former full-contact world champion who found new life in K-1, initially as the protégé of Andy Hoog, then as the rechristened Black Sniper. He's worked his way up through the company since 1998, on his way to becoming its most successful North American fighter. He lost a qualifying match for the Grand Prix to the recently debuted Semi Schilt, but had enjoyed such success in the US tournaments earlier in the year that he was invited as a reservist. It's the closest he's ever come to the finals. Holm is a Muay Thai champion representing the famous Vallentuna boxing camp. He debuted for K-1 only 9 months earlier, and despite losing his qualifying match to Sefo and amassing only a 2-1 record with the promotion, his knockout victories over Yoki Oberholzer and Glabe Feitosa proved so impressive that he too was named a reservist. His nimbleness and fantastic flying knees could serve him well tonight. The winner of the match is to be inserted in the tournament proper, if any of the contenders cannot compete. Round 1. Holm lands a low kick as McDonald kicks high, knocking him off balance. The fighters mostly exchange low and mid kicks, Martin eventually sinking one of his signature knees to Michael's ribs. McDonald attempts the Hoog tornado, then avoids a big roundhouse punch before the round ends. Round 2. Another big knee from Holm knocks McDonald backwards, and Michael slips while delivering a kick. McDonald draws Holm in and sinks a left jab, but must accept a right low kick in return. More kicks are exchanged, Holm eventually landing more. After taking a knee to the temple, McDonald blocks further ones in the clinch and hits a right jab. Martin keeps trying the knee, but Michael keeps blocking with his forearms. McDonald lands a right mid-kick, and the round concludes with both fighters kicking low. Thus far, the match has been relatively indecisive, though Martin Holm's knees have likely earned him more points. Neither fighter has cut loose, likely saving their energy for potential future matches, but both will need to lay in heavily to either sway the judges or score a knockout. Round 3. McDonald hangs back, playing counterfighter to Holm's aggressiveness. He has limited success, because Holm usually has a jab or a low kick lined up to top his opponent's counters. McDonald absorbs a big mid-kick, then a roundhouse kick to the head that places him on the defensive. He attempts another low-spinning heel kick, but loses his balance. Holm finds purchase with more knees and low kicks, McDonald seemingly tiring before the final bell rings. Unsurprisingly, the judges rule a majority decision for Martin Holm, 2 of the 3 scoring the match 30-29 in his favor. Holm proved himself the more effective fighter, able to match Michael McDonald's agility, and as predicted, his greater ability to fight at close range served him well. McDonald would go on to win one more tournament with K-1 before his retirement in 2008, but he never appeared at the World Grand Prix again in any capacity. It was an unfortunate habit of his to perform inconsistently, the effectiveness of a previous match giving way to a more middling performance, best demonstrated by his upset victory over Mirko Cro Cop in last year's Melbourne Grand Prix, followed by a one-sided semifinal loss to Matt Skelton. Tonight, his tactics and luck were on the wane, leading to a disappointing showing by Canada's best heavyweight. The tournament proper begins with our first quarterfinal bout, New Zealand's Sefo versus the Netherlands' Peter Aerts. As mentioned before, Sefo earned his entry by defeating Martin Holm during the final eliminations in Fukuoka, thereby continuing his unbeaten streak for 2002. Like many fighters in the brackets, his name is synonymous with K-1, having become one of the company's most popular stars since debuting 4 years ago. He's made it to the Grand Prix 3 times already, having only been kept out of last year's event due to injury. In 2000, he came the closest he'd ever been to the grand prize, suffering a decision loss in the tournament final. With his great strength, tremendous right hook, and effective ring psychology, he stands as great a chance as ever at reaching the top. Of course, he faces stiff competition in the legendary Peter Aerts, a man whose identity is even more a part of K-1 than his opponents. Already a 3-time World Grand Prix winner, as well as a 4-time world champion, Aerts had long since carved out his status as one of the greatest heavyweight kickboxers of all time, having faced and defeated just about every major star K-1 has hosted. Nevertheless, he seems to find himself in a career low. The man who'd once enjoyed an almost 6-year unbeaten streak has achieved few major victories since the latter half of 2000, having withdrawn from that year's Grand Prix because of injury and suffering a TKO in the 2001 quarterfinals. He's still one of the all-time greats, but finds himself vulnerable to some of the promotion's younger stars. The King is on a mission to reclaim the crown he hasn't worn since 1998, but it's bound to be an uphill battle. This is the second time these fighters have competed against each other, the first showdown happening 2 years prior in Osaka, with Aerts defeating Sefo via low kick. The next several minutes will show whether Ray has improved enough to best his old rival. Round 1. The fighters feel each other out with low kicks and jabs, but it's not long before they're mixing it up, Sefo becoming the aggressor with his dangerous fists. Aerts stands his ground, often trying to start a combination ahead of his opponent. Heavy low kicks are exchanged, Peter also throwing jabs before Ray hits him with a countering hook. Sefo lands a shot to the sternum and swipes Aerts' nose before the round ends. Both boxers are already trying to establish themselves as the aggressor, Sefo doing an admirable job of absorbing punishment before striking back. Round 2. Aerts lands a right to the side of the head. He hits a knee to the dome after being pushed into the corner, then sinks his signature roundhouse kick to the head. However, Sefo absorbs it easily, and gets the crowd excited as he drops his gloves for his trademark baiting. He misses with a spinning back fist, but is able to back away from Aerts' punches before darting forward with a few of his own. A mighty left knocks Peter backwards, and then a right penetrates his defenses, making the lumberjack back up again. Then it's Aerts' turn to stun his opponent, slowing Sefo down with low kicks. Ray returns to throwing bombs at close range, including a left hook right before the bell rings. Round 3. Aerts finds purchase with a right low kick, and Sefo misses with a hard right hook. Sefo drives Aerts against the ropes, but the Dutchman covers up well. Not so for the big right hook. Sefo baits Aerts in the horse stance after taking another thundering low kick, and howls theatrically as he's pushed into the corner. Some head movement goes awry for the New Zealander as Aerts attacks, landing several strikes to the dome before a slip. The match comes to a close, and the question posed to the judges is whether Sefo's fists were more impressive than Aerts' low kicks. It would seem as though Peter landed more strikes in total, but Ray landed more significant ones, particularly those to the head. A 2-1 split decision is delivered in favor of Ray Sefo, who avenges his prior loss to Aerts and moves on to the next round. It's a just verdict, both fighters having had the potential to win, but Sefo's toughness saw him through what was easily one of the biggest challenges of his career. Aerts may not have been at his very best, but he was still a more than formidable opponent. Peter retires from the tournament, but not from kickboxing. He never won another World Grand Prix, but reached the tournament no less than 7 more times, making it to the finals for 3 of those. He continued fighting until at least 2020, his status as a legend undiminished. We move on to the next quarterfinal, and one of the most hotly anticipated fights in K-1 history. It's the rematch between Mr. Perfect, Ernesto Hoost, and Bob, the Beast, Sapp. Hoost is a man who needs little introduction, standing on par with Peter Aerts as someone intrinsically identified with the company. A 3-time World Grand Prix champion, 2-time K2 Grand Prix winner, and 7-time world champion across multiple rules, the Dutchman of Surinamese descent is quite possibly the most decorated heavyweight kickboxer in the world, and commands tremendous respect from both fans and opponents. These accolades made it all the more shocking when, 2 months prior, he lost his qualifying match to K-1's biggest new rookie. Bob Sapp is a former gridiron player and professional wrestler who began a career in competitive fighting at the suggestion of friend Sam Greco. K-1 president, Kazuyoshi Ishii, saw great marketability in the American, and after fighting his first professional bout in the Pride Fighting Championships under MMA rules, Sapp debuted for K-1 only 6 months prior to the tournament. With a fighting style comparable to a charging rhinoceros, Sapp has amassed a 2-1 record in kickboxing, his initial loss the result of a brutal disqualification against his opponent, and his defeat of Hoost in Fukuoka counting as one of the biggest upsets in the company. Sapp's ring performance and indeed his entire career seems the antithesis of his adversary. While Hoost is one of the great strategists and technicians of his weight class, Sapp swarms opponents before destroying them with clubbing blows. Hoost debuted for K-1 at the very first Grand Prix, but was hand-picked for this following an illustrious 10-year career. While Sapp is hardly the first fighter to be promoted so hard by K-1 so early after debuting, he is the first to receive such treatment without having any significant background in competitive fighting. Nevertheless, it's difficult to argue against the decision to market him, as Sapp's larger-than-life personality quickly made him a fan favorite in Japan. This helps make their showdown one of the most unique and contrasting matches throughout kickboxing. Round 1. Sapp storms in, throwing punches as Ernesto backs up at top speed, launching low kicks all the while. He doesn't allow himself to be pinned against the ropes or in the corner like in their previous encounter, wisely choosing to move laterally whenever possible. Sapp is clearly hurting from the kicks within the first minute, and Hoost is able to lay in with some punches to the face. Sapp goes to the mat following a shot to the ribs as the round reaches the 90-second mark, but is able to regain his feet. Sapp is a sitting duck when Hoost is fighting from a distance, and very nearly goes down again before receiving several unprotected strikes to the face. This round was entirely in Hoost's favor, Sapp barely managing to land a single solid strike of his own. Nevertheless, Hoost cannot allow himself to become overconfident, as Sapp's hammering punches remain a threat. Everything the American lacks in conventional combat skills is made up for by his frightening strength, and all it would take to turn the tables is for a single punch to breach Hoost's defenses. Round 2. Sapp charges again, but Hoost backs away and lands bunches of punches. Sapp finally connects with a mighty strike against the ropes, and it succeeds in slowing his opponent down. Hoost catches some more big punches in the clinch, then goes down for a count following a huge swinging right. He rises, but stands immobile as the beast lays in, Sapp's inaccuracy seemingly being the only thing keeping him from scoring another knockdown. However, Ernesto manages to absorb everything Bob throws at him, and once the bigger man has effectively punched himself out, Mr. Perfect returns to the offensive. He lands a hook to Sapp's ribs, then another which has the American sitting on the ropes. Hoost refuses to back down as Sapp leans on him, choosing to push back rather than stepping sideways. He's forced into the corner, where Bob begins to unload, furiously burning through his remaining strength. Seconds later, inexplicably, the referee pushes between them and calls for the bell. Bob Sapp wins via stoppage, Hoost having supposedly exceeded the 2 knockdown rule with what would probably have been a standing 8 count. This has been the most furious and exciting fight of the tournament, the audience rarely having left their feet throughout. It's an even bigger upset than when Sapp defeated Hoost previously, and he is now one of the few fighters to have earned back-to-back victories over Mr. Perfect. Nevertheless, this is also one of the most controversial calls in K-1 history. The referee's decision to declare a stoppage while Hoost was still on his feet and actively defending himself would have been questionable in any circumstance, but to do so during the biggest event of the year, in favor of someone the company had a vested interest in advancing, amplifies the contention. Hoost is bleeding, but even immediately after the bell rings, he shows no indication of being unable to continue. As it turns out, he would, indeed, continue. Sapp is carried, huffing and puffing, back to his dressing room by his corner men, but sheer exhaustion is the least of his concerns. He suffered a broken hand during the match, and is obliged to leave the tournament as a medical precaution. At this point, with one fighter unable to continue and the other having been technically knocked out, it would be standard for the winner of the reserve bout to enter the tournament in their place. Holm should have been lacing up his gloves. However, K-1 made the decision to allow Ernesto Hoost to advance to the semifinals instead, as a sort of survivor stipulation. I'm not sure how this decision was justified when there was a reserve fighter waiting in the wings, but it feels like something of a rectification, as though the company is conceding that Hoost wasn't as beaten up as the stoppage indicated. Whatever the case, the first semifinal has now been decided. It will be Sefo versus Ernesto Hoost. Holm exits the tournament at this time as well, quietly and without further acknowledgement. He competed for K-1 for another year and a half, and appeared at the World Grand Prix again in 2003, albeit in a non-tournament superfight. He largely retired from competition in 2004, but fought at least one more match in 2006. He struggled with depression in the aftermath, and tragically ended his life in 2009. He was 32 years old. Sapp continued to compete in both kickboxing and mixed martial arts until at least 2018, but despite winning a regional tournament in 2005, he never returned to the World Grand Prix. Both his record and reputation have suffered since, opponents coming to master his aggressive but predictable tactics. Sapp also developed a trademark of conceding fights prematurely and of his own accord, publicly stating that he did this to avoid injury. In late 2017, he was accused of domestic violence by a longtime girlfriend, which correlated with a drop in all media appearances. Quarterfinal number 3 keeps the stakes high, as Germany's Stefan Leko takes on the reigning World Grand Prix champion, New Zealand's Mark Hunt. Leko is appearing at the Grand Prix for the third time, and will be meeting Hunt for the second time, the two having been matched up in the semifinals during the previous year. Leko defeated Alexei Ignashov at the final eliminations, and already boasts victories over respective past and future Grand Prix champions Peter Aerts and Remy Bonjasky. He's typically the smaller man in a match, but has made up for this with great speed and some of the best technical striking in the company. Possessing an iron chin and one of the most devastating right hands in the business, Mark Hunt ended up at the 2001 Grand Prix due to other fighters' injuries, but proved himself more than worthy of the honor by knocking out the legendary Jerome and decisioning both Francisco Filho and Stefan Leko. In doing so, he led the wave of new stars the company promoted after Andy Hoog's death. Nevertheless, the first New Zealand Grand Prix champion suffers from inconsistency, having eliminated Mike Bernardo to make it here but otherwise losing high-profile bouts earlier in the year to Mirko Cro Cop and his old rival Labanere. It will be up to the champ to show that he has what it takes to retain his title. Round 1. Leko hangs back while Hunt attacks with low kicks, then with countering combinations. Mark throws a spinning back fist, then blocks Leko's signature back kick. Leko circles, throwing low kicks, but Hunt never waits long before closing the distance again with his fists. He avoids a spinning back fist from Leko and lands a strike to his ribs. Leko's low kicks seem to be hurting his opponent, but Hunt keeps up the pressure with his hands as the round ends. Round 2. Leko guards well against Hunt's inside fighting, and continues to attack from the outside, the more methodical pace of the middle round working to his advantage. He counters well against a combination, but Mark absorbs these strikes well and doesn't look the worse for wear. Hunt wins a close exchange, utilizing good head movement, and then tries for a rare head kick. Leko tries a roundhouse kick of his own in the final seconds, but this is blocked. The first round favored Hunt, while the second favored Leko. Whether it was due to exhaustion or tactical reasons, Mark slowing down has worked out well for Stefan, who could conceivably outpoint his opponent if the match continues on this trajectory. Round 3. Leko goes on circling, and he bounces off the ropes to deliver some punches to the face before being knocked down in a slip. Hunt lands a right to the face, but Stefan is able to absorb it. Then, abruptly, Hunt sinks a mighty left from the middle distance that sends Leko to the mat. He rises, his nose bleeding, but sinks back down as he retreats to the corner. The match is called and Mark Hunt wins by knockout, advancing to the semifinals. Leko wasn't completely outshone, and he highlighted a lot of gaps in Hunt's armor, but Mark's combination of surprising speed and sheer power won the battle. It was actually a very strategic win, as his holding back after the initial barrage likely lulled his opponent into a sort of complacency, making him forget that the stocky fighter is extremely dangerous even when he's not darting forward. Stefan fought for K-1 for another 7 years, qualifying for the Grand Prix another 2 times but only appearing once due to a contractual dispute. He continued in journeyman fashion until at least 2020, though a career-threatening injury suffered in 2010 left him a shell of his former self. He remains a cult favorite in the kickboxing world, but has endured an abysmal 2-15 record in the decade since his injury. The last quarterfinal arrives in the form of Jerome of France taking on Japan's Musashi. Leko is perhaps the ultimate uncrowned king of K-1, as a dominant three-time world champion now making his third entrance to the World Grand Prix. He reached the finals of the 1995 show within his first 4 matches for the promotion, and since then has secured his status as one of the most popular and successful super heavyweights of all time. With spectacular power in all 4 of his limbs and a tremendous knockout percentage, he boasts a card of victories matching that of any of K-1's elite, with wins over Ernesto Hoost, Peter Aerts, Mark Hunt, Mike Bernardo and Masaaki Satake. As always, it would be a genuine surprise if he weren't to come out on top. His opponent carries the hope of an entire country on his shoulders. Akio Mori, the man better known as Musashi, is arguably the greatest prospect there would ever be of a Japanese World Grand Prix winner. It isn't a revelation that Kazuyoshi Ishii had long hoped for a Japanese heavyweight champion, someone who could compete with literally the biggest stars of kickboxing. But while K-1 had tried to force the creation of a heavyweight contender several times, none had shown the same promise and development as the former karate competitor, who now reaches the big event for the 4th time in his 7-year career. Musashi earned entry to this year's tournament by winning the Andy Spirits event, making him the only boxer to enter the Grand Prix not as an invitee or by participating in the final eliminations. He's yet to defeat a fighter of Leko's caliber, and has his work cut out for him if he hopes to meet Mark Hunt in the semifinals. Round 1. The fighters trade punches, showing good technique. Musashi is forced to fight defensively, quickly realizing that he can't stand and slug with Leko. A short right catches him in the head, and then another. He avoids a hard hook, but Leko stands his ground against an attempted combo. A spinning back kick leads to Musashi taking a hard series of strikes, then enduring Leko's fists against the ropes. Musashi lands an uppercut, but to no effect. Several hard jabs to the face follow, and Musashi suffers a knockdown as the round ends, only barely making it back to his feet. This was an absolutely dominant start for Leko and a horrible beginning for Musashi. The modern-day samurai was able to land his share of strikes, but nothing he threw was anywhere near as effective as the strikes from the hyperbattle cyborg. He's almost certainly reconsidering his strategy, as he desperately tries to regroup in the corner. Round 2. Musashi tries standing his ground as Leko pushes in again, but he catches the worst of the subsequent exchanges, taking punch after punch to the face and being driven repeatedly to the clinch. He lands a right roundhouse kick to the head, but Leko absorbs it like the Rock of Gibraltar and promptly responds with a set of punches that sends his opponent to the canvas. Musashi's corner throws in the towel, unwilling to watch him receive any more punishment, and thereby forfeit the match on his account. An incredibly dominant Jerome Leko wins via stoppage and advances to the semifinals. Musashi was completely overwhelmed. He attempted to give as good as he received, but was no match for his opponent's deadly combination of power, speed and accuracy. He showed heart, and no doubt would have fought for as long as he could, but his corner likely made the right decision in ending the match. The chances of him turning the tables seemed very slim, while the chances of him being injured were increasingly high. Nevertheless, this loss seemed to be the last bit of tribulation Musashi had to bear before hitting his true stride. He reached the finals of the 2 following Grand Prix tournaments, defeating some of the company's top stars in the process. Though it seemed unlikely during this night in Tokyo, he would eventually become one of the company's elites, before retiring in 2009. With Bob Sapp out of the tournament, the first of 2 semifinals formulates as Sefo versus Ernesto Hoost. It's the 3rd time they've faced each other, Ernesto having delivered Ray the first loss of his career back in 1996, and the two went the distance for the 2000 World Grand Prix title, Hoost winning by unanimous decision. But Sefo has already proven tonight that he's capable of defeating a 3-time winner, and while he's fought more rounds than Hoost has, he didn't suffer a knockdown. Ernesto has a second chance at this tournament, but he will need to have regrouped effectively after initially assuming he could relax. Sefo must now also change strategies, no doubt realizing that he can't fight Hoost the same way he would have fought Sapp. In short, both fighters must come to terms with an unexpected twist of fate. Round 1. Hoost gets purchase with low kicks early on, clearly hurting Sefo as the New Zealander tries to come in with punches. Ray stands in place and baits Ernesto in, avoiding a punch and blocking a high kick. Again, Hoost lands a low kick. Sefo throws one of his own, then immediately falls to the ground, having injured his shin by his own attack. The 10 count is delivered, but Sefo limps in pain as he rises and the bell is rung, Ernesto Hoost winning via technical stoppage. This disappointingly short match is a godsend to Hoost, and no doubt heartbreaking for Sefo. As with most self-inflicted injuries, it makes for neither a decisive victory nor a decisive loss, and doubtlessly everyone in attendance would have preferred to see a more complete fight between these two K-1 front-runners. Nevertheless, there's no arguing with injuries, and Hoost advances to the finals while Sefo leaves the tournament. He'd fight for the company for another 8 years, making it to the Grand Prix thrice more, 5 times, including his 2 years as a reservist. He retired from competition entirely after 2013, and now operates his own mixed martial arts league. He remains one of K-1's legends. As the tournament races towards its end, its number of possible outcomes heavily depleted, it's time for 2 of the show's hardest sluggers to meet for their 3rd showdown in just over a year. The rubber match between Mark Hunt and Jerome will not only determine who meets Ernesto Hoost in the final, but also who is the top brawler in the company. Hunt and have built their reputations on brutally knocking people out, and have done the same to each other. Hunt achieving a KO over at the previous Grand Prix, and a technical knockout on his home turf in Paris. The path to the world title is on the line, but so is a lot of pride. Round 1. Hunt presses in early, scoring a left to the face and pushing into the corner, but the Frenchman pushes back. The fighters are absolutely throwing leather, neither willingly backing up. Begins laying in with low kicks and Hunt closes the distance for an uppercut. Throws a hard knee which knocks Hunt backwards, then Hunt throws an unexpected high kick. Gets the better of an exchange and ends with another low kick. Hunt finally starts to backpedal, realizing he can't fight effectively at the middle distance. This very hard-hitting opening round has made Lebaner's nose bleed, but Jerome seems to have made out better with points. He caught some hard strikes, all of which likely affected him more than anything in his previous match, but his greater propensity for kicks has given him an advantage over the comparatively limited New Zealander. Round 2. is pushed down for a slip, then Hunt judos him to the mat again. He catches Jerome with a hard left hook, then a countering uppercut. However, Lebaner's low kicks show efficacy as Hunt suffers the first knockdown following a particularly hard strike to the thigh. He valiantly fights the urge to fall again as Lebaner knees him repeatedly in the corner. Lebaner raises Hunt's defense with a high kick, then lays in with punches, in the corner and against the ropes. Hunt's chin serves him well as Lebaner commences a multi-level attack, Mark managing to remain upright as the taller man launches an assault on his legs and face. Amazingly, the reigning Grand Prix champion stays on his feet until the bell rings, giving him a much-needed respite. Lebaner couldn't possibly have asserted himself more strongly, short of a knockout. He's doing everything he needs to maintain a dominant advantage, and Hunt must come up with some sort of strategy if he hopes to pull this match out of the fire. Round 3. Hunt looks visibly exhausted as the final 3 minutes commence. Lebaner hangs back, countering with a hard left when Hunt finally advances. Mark comes in again, but Labanner meets him with a knee. A slip gives Hunt a brief moment of hope, but Labanner attacks with low kicks again and sinks another knee. Hunt's uppercut lands, but there's decisively less power behind it than before. A straight left by Labanner also lands, and he's clearly the more energized fighter as the round ticks through its second half. Hunt's punches have become wildly inaccurate, and Labanner takes his time setting up a left roundhouse kick and a straight left that staggers Hunt. Then, in a dramatic display of finding strength in desperation, Mark scores a knockdown with a countering right straight, moments before the round ends. It's a Hail Mary moment, and after Jerome manages to make it back to his feet, the question on everyone's mind is whether this can possibly be enough to make up for the large point disparity of previous rounds. As it turns out, the answer is no. The judges rule a unanimous decision in favor of Jerome Labanner, all three delivering a 29-26 blowout verdict. K-1's Cyborg advances to the finals for the second time in his career, ready to meet Ernesto Hoost. Despite being unable to recapture last year's glory, Hunt demonstrated both the mighty handiwork and amazing toughness that would always mark his career, and this made for an extremely exciting bout. This night in Tokyo was something of a turning point for the boxer. He fought one more K-1 match in 2003, before effectively retiring from kickboxing and committing himself to the world of mixed martial arts, where he quickly became a fan favorite again and earned the intimidating nickname, the King of the Walk-Offs. He briefly returned to K-1 in 2008, unsuccessfully challenging Semi Shilk for his super heavyweight championship. And so we reach the finals, the biggest match on the biggest show, between two of the biggest stars the sport has ever known. It seems to be a night for rubber matches, as the rivalry between Ernesto Hoost and Jerome Labanner has actively spanned the last 6 years. Since 1996, the two have done battle 4 times, each victory a decisive one, leaving it genuinely unclear who is the superior fighter. Hoost, the ever-adaptive master of the low kick, or Labanner, the most skilled and successful brawler in the business. In times past, Ernesto has come out on top in their matches at the World Grand Prix, but Jerome won their most recent bout. Electricity is in the air as the fighters arrive back in the arena theatrically on cranes, and it's still present when they touch gloves. Hoost is no doubt feeling like the luckiest man in the world to have come this far despite setbacks, and Labanner is determined that he won't fail in his second chance at the big one. Whatever the outcome, this is bound to be among the most important 3 rounds of their lives. Round 1 begins. Labanner advances with combinations while Hoost hangs back to throw low kicks. Attempts by both fighters to come forward are stifled. Hoost catches an inadvertent low blow, but still has the wherewithal to avoid a right hook before the referee calls a timeout. Both fighters catch punches, and Hoost follows up with another low kick. Jerome blocks a high kick. Hoost repeatedly comes in with a ducking right straight, but loses his balance on a slip. As the round comes to an end, Labanner remains the aggressor while Hoost fights in countering style. It's largely been an even round, and it's difficult to determine who, if anyone, holds the advantage. Round 2. A right hook lands, likely leading to the cut which necessitates a medical timeout. When the match continues, Labanner connects with a hard mid-kick while Hoost keeps hammering away with low kicks. Neither fighter is backing off, coming in at the same time with fists. Hoost lands a visibly painful kick to Labanner's arm. Ernesto goes down for another slip, and both fighters receive a penalty for repeated holding. With 1 round left to go, it's still impossible to say who's ahead on points. Labanner and Hoost have gone tit for tat, eventually coming to fight the same style of match. Neither fighter wants to give in, and neither particularly wants to win by decision. The verdict may come down to a matter of whose defense gives way first. Round 3. Hoost blocks a high roundhouse kick, then comes in with a couple of successful combinations. Then, the beginning of the end occurs. Le Banner blocks a right high kick, and immediately retreats to the corner, his face a mask of pain and his left arm clearly injured. The referee administers a standing 8 count, and Le Banner seems to draw on all of his remaining fortitude to raise his fists and return to battle. Hoost immediately throws another roundhouse kick, and again Le Banner withdraws in agony. Something is clearly the matter. Another 8 count is given, and, perhaps against all common sense, the Bulldog of Normandy agrees to fight again. There is no surrender in his heart. Hoost measures what will be the final strike thrown of the night, and launches one last roundhouse kick to the arm, sending Le Banner to the mat in excruciating pain. As per the 3 knockdown rule, the match is called. Jerome Le Banner loses via technical knockout, and Ernesto Hoost wins the 2002 K-1 World Grand Prix Championship. He is the first fighter in history to win the tournament 4 times. Hoost screams with happiness while Le Banner fights back tears of pain and frustration. As confetti rains down around him, Hoost is presented with a golden cup and a special championship belt. He is 37 years old, an age when most professional fighters are considering retirement, yet he's managed to prove himself the greatest heavyweight kickboxer in the entire world. He will hold his record for World Grand Prix wins for 7 years, at which point it will be shared with fellow K-1 great, Semi Schilt, but never eclipsed. He still maintains this honor today, having largely retired in 2006. While Jerome Le Banner should have every right to be proud of his runner-up status and his enhanced credentials for sheer toughness, it must be difficult for him to feel like a winner over the pain of his injury. Le Banner suffered a compound fracture in his arm, likely precipitated by Hoost's kick in the second round. Instead of spending the night unwinding from the match or even celebrating with his comrades, Le Banner spent it in a Tokyo hospital, eventually requiring the insertion of a metal rod and 11 surgical pins to help treat a career-threatening injury. Quite remarkably, he returned to competition after only 6 months, and played out what proved to be one of the more long-lived careers of his era, though the after-effects of the fracture likely continued to trouble him. He reached the Grand Prix 5 more times before leaving K-1 in 2010, becoming one of the most dominant and valuable free agents in the world. At the time of this posting, he's fought his most recent match in 2019, just days shy of his 47th birthday. Despite never winning the Grand Prix, he is regularly counted among the greatest kickboxers of all time, often ranking higher than even Ernesto Hoost. So ends the biggest show K-1 ever produced, and, again, possibly the biggest kickboxing event in history. It's required viewing for all martial arts fans, and is even fairly accessible for newcomers to the sport. The short number of rounds per bout, coupled with the bombastic matchmaking and high-quality presentation, makes it easy for even junior viewers to appreciate 8 matches of mostly high-level kickboxing. That said, the irregularities we've seen tonight don't reflect positively on the company, especially at a time when it was trying to have its product taken as seriously as other sports. I've spoken about my feelings towards some of the decisions involved here, but I believe special mention deserves be made of the key referee in question, Nobuaki Kakuta. Kakuta had and would be a very influential individual in K-1. He was a student of Master Ishii's Seitokaiken School, a karate and kickboxing competitor, and also a trainer to many K-1 athletes. In addition to being a referee, he would also go on to be a producer for the company, after Ishii stepped down from his position in light of legal troubles. It was common for him to officiate high-profile bouts, his fluency in 5 different languages no doubt proving invaluable when dealing with fighters from around the world. However, his conduct as an in-ring official has been the subject of much publicized criticism, and his presence in the final match may very well have contributed to the severity of Jerome Le Banner's injury. It was clearly the wrong decision to allow Labanere to continue fighting, after the boxer himself repeatedly and voluntarily broke off engagement. The decision is all the more irresponsible when considering Kakuta's unique perspective as both an experienced referee and a fighter in his own right, as this would seem to make the possibility of him overlooking such a major injury extremely unlikely. It's ironic, to say the least, that Kakuta was so certain that Ernesto Hoost was unable to defend himself against Bob Sapp, but somehow thought it appropriate to allow Labanere to keep fighting despite clearly being hurt. I don't believe that Kakuta purposely showed malice towards any fighter, but his decision to prolong the match at the expense of the safety of a kickboxer reflects poorly on both him and the company. Nevertheless, the 2002 K-1 World Grand Prix is an apt and worthy holder for the title of most successful kickboxing show. The amount of high-class talent assembled for a single show is a staple of the company's events, but the quality of competition and number of exciting turns ensured that few fans left the Tokyo Dome that night feeling dissatisfied. Whether it's the best kickboxing show is another matter, and it failed to create the new breakout star the company so clearly wanted, but I still recommend it to anyone who's a fan of stand-up striking.